Captain Morgan Hayes paced the observation deck of the Eagle's Claw, her flagship, as the massive Ardari warship loomed ahead. The glittering star field outside was a stark contrast to the tension in the air. Earth's delegation had been invited to this summit under the false pretense of a peaceful resolution, but Morgan knew better. She had seen the signs, the subtle shifts in Ardari behavior, the veiled threats buried in diplomatic speeches. The Ardari were playing a game, and Earth wasn't invited to win. How much longer until the fleet is in position? Morgan asked, turning to Lieutenant Carlos Reyes, her tactical officer. 20 minutes, Captain. Reyes replied, his voice steady but betraying a hint of nervousness. The Ardari's unmatched fleet had been shadowing their convoy for days, a constant reminder of just how outmatched they were in this political theatre. Reyes' gaze flickered to the holographic display of the Eagle's Claw's position relative to the Ardari flagship. It was an elegant ship, all sleek lines and dark chrome. The Ardari had perfected the art of intimidation with their ship designs alone. Just then, the conference doors slid open, and Earth's ambassador, Julian Walker, strode in, his expression calm, but tinged with frustration. "Captain, we're expected in the negotiation chamber," he said, adjusting his jacket. Morgan knew Walker had his reservations about the summit. As a veteran diplomat, he had seen the Ardari's manipulative tactics before. Still, he had insisted they come, hoping that their status in the alliance could be preserved through diplomacy. Morgan wasn't so sure. "You sure the Ardari will honor the terms this time?" Morgan asked, arching an eyebrow. Walker hesitated, then glanced at the floor. "Not if they think we're weak." Morgan nodded. "Then let's show them we're not." The Ardari leader, High Commander Zihar, greeted them with his usual air of superiority. His golden eyes, ancient and cold, studied Morgan with a calculating intensity. "Captain Hayes," he said in a voice that dripped with condescension, "I trust you are prepared to listen to reason." Morgan's hand clenched into a fist at her side, but she forced a calm smile. Reason, or another demand for submission? The Ardari commander's lips curled into a faint, amused smile. Perhaps a little of both. As the meeting progressed, it quickly became apparent that the Ardari had no intention of discussing peace. The ultimatum was clear. Either Earth would submit to their control or face the consequences. The fragile alliance, built over decades, was unraveling before their eyes. Morgan's gut twisted as she exchanged a look with Ambassador Walker. The summit had just become a battle for humanity's very survival. The doors to the conference chamber hissed shut behind Morgan as she stepped away from the Ardari delegation, her thoughts racing. High Commander Zihar's ultimatum echoed in her mind: submit or face destruction. It was a simple equation to the Ardari. They didn't believe in negotiation. To them, humanity's place in the galaxy had always been one of subservience. Morgan's chest tightened as she thought about Earth's leaders back home, divided, fearful, hesitant. They would want to appease the Ardari. They would want to submit. But she would not. She strode briskly down the corridor, barely acknowledging the polite nods from fellow delegates as she passed. Her mind was already spinning with the possibilities. She had no illusions about Earth's military capabilities. The Ardari had the firepower to decimate Earth in a heartbeat. But if they underestimated humanity's willingness to fight back, if they underestimated the human drive for freedom, they might just be in for a rude awakening. "Captain Hayes," a voice called from behind. She turned to find Ambassador Walker, his face drawn tight with concern. "We need to talk," he said quietly, glancing down the hallway before stepping closer. "What's on your mind?" Morgan asked, trying to keep her voice even. "It's worse than we thought," Walker replied, his eyes flickering with unease. "I've just received word from Earth. The Council's already leaning toward giving in. They think this is our only chance to avoid war." Morgan felt a cold surge of anger. The Council's cowardice wasn't new, but hearing it confirmed was a bitter pill to swallow. "That's exactly what they want, Julian. They're counting on us to fold. This isn't a negotiation. It's an ultimatum, pure and simple." Walker hesitated, his face lined with years of diplomatic struggle. "You can't possibly think we have a chance in hell of fighting back. The Ardari aren't just a military threat. They control the entire sector. We're too small, too scattered." Morgan's jaw tightened. "That's what they think. But they don't understand us. We may not be able to match their firepower, but we have something they don't: imagination. We'll find a way." Walker's eyes widened slightly, sensing the fire in her voice. "What are you suggesting?" "We fight," Morgan said, her voice firm. "We start small. Guerrilla strikes. Disrupt their systems. Hit them where it hurts. And we make sure they know we won't go down quietly." The ambassador hesitated again, then nodded. "It's going to be messy. But maybe it's the only option left." Morgan stepped toward the viewport, gazing out at the distant stars. For the first time in days, she felt the rush of purpose she'd been searching for. The Ardari had made their mistake. Humanity was not just going to stand aside and be crushed. They were going to make sure the galaxy remembered the cost of underestimating humans. "Get me in touch with Earth's resistance," Morgan said, determination setting in. "It's time we changed the game." The message was clear. War was inevitable. The Ardari would not be swayed by diplomacy, and humanity could not afford to wait any longer. Morgan Hayes wasted no time. She immediately called an emergency meeting with the leaders of Earth's military and scientific communities, as well as representatives from the resistance movements that had been quietly gathering strength in the colonies. It was time to stop being reactive and take the initiative. "Look, we know the odds," Morgan said, standing at the head of the table aboard the Eagle's Claw. "We know that the Ardari could destroy Earth in a matter of hours if they wanted. But we also know something else, something they don't. We know how to fight dirty. And we know that we don't need to win every battle to make them bleed." Dr. Alexis Lex Carter, an astrophysicist and weapons expert, leaned forward, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "We've been working on a series of unconventional weapons, technology we've kept under wraps for years. Nothing on the scale of what the Ardari can bring to bear, but small, strategic hits could cripple their supply chains, disrupt communications, and throw them off balance." Morgan's gaze sharpened. "How soon can we deploy these weapons?" "In a matter of weeks," Lex replied. "I've also been in contact with a few colonies who have secreted away experimental tech, some stolen from Ardari outposts. We have a chance to catch them off guard." It wasn't much, but it was a start. The humans had one clear advantage: they were unpredictable. The Ardari had long prided themselves on their control over all things, and their immense technological superiority made them complacent. They didn't anticipate human ingenuity in warfare, how humans could adapt to the unthinkable and exploit every weakness. They would find out soon enough. Within days, a small task force of human ships, including the Eagle's Claw, entered a low orbit around the Ardari-controlled mining colony on Relentless, a remote moon in the farthest reaches of Ardari space. The moon was vital to the Ardari war effort, supplying critical resources used in the construction of their fleet. Morgan's plan was simple: strike fast, hit hard, and disappear into the void before the Ardari could retaliate. As the assault force descended into the moon's shadow, Lex activated the new electromagnetic pulse, EMP weapon. Within moments, the moon's defense grid went dark. A series of carefully coordinated strikes incapacitated Ardari security forces and disabled their mining operations. The mission was a success, but there was no time to celebrate. The Ardari were already responding. A fleet of warships was on the move, and Morgan knew they would come in full force. But this was only the beginning. As the Eagle's Claw powered up and left the system, Morgan felt the first real spark of hope. If humanity could keep the Ardari off balance, maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. But the real test was yet to come. The Ardari would retaliate, and it would be brutal. The strike on Varellus had been a success, but it had come with a steep price. In the aftermath, Morgan watched as the Ardari retaliated with a speed and precision that sent a chill down her spine. The Eagle's Claw barely escaped the moon's atmosphere before a massive Ardari battle group entered the system, their ships glowing ominously against the cold vacuum of space. Earth had made its mark, but the Ardari were furious, and now they would show no mercy. The fleet had scattered to avoid detection, each ship hiding among asteroids, drifting in the vast silence. But Morgan knew this was only a temporary measure. The Ardari were relentless, and they would not be fooled for long. "We've been made, Captain," Lieutenant Reyes reported as the latest intelligence streams filled the briefing room aboard the Eagle's Claw. His eyes were grim. "The Ardari are sweeping through the system. Their fleet's only 2 hours out from us. They've launched full-scale searches across every sector. They won't stop until they find us." Morgan's mind raced. This wasn't the guerrilla warfare she'd envisioned. They'd pushed the Ardari, and now they were coming with everything they had. The humans had no choice but to strike again, or risk being hunted down one by one. "I'll give them one more target," Morgan said, her voice steel. "But we need to move fast. We hit them, and we vanish before they have time to retaliate." Lex Carter, who had been silent up until this point, looked up from the data streams she had been poring over. "We've got another problem, Morgan. The Ardari now know we've breached their secure networks. They'll be expecting us to strike again, and they'll have countermeasures in place. Their fleet's already on high alert." Morgan clenched her fists, but she didn't back down. "Then we give them something they don't expect. We hit their supply chains, disrupt their logistics. That's where we can really hurt them. If they can't get reinforcements, they'll have to pull back. It'll buy us time." Just as Morgan was about to give the orders, a message flashed across the command panel. The human fleet was compromised. One of their key ships had been ambushed. Damn it. Morgan slammed her fist on the console. "Who?" "Admiral Reed," Reyes said, his voice thick with disbelief. "He's turned. He's given them intel. Everything about our movement. They know where we are." The betrayal hit like a blow to the stomach. Admiral Jackson Reed, once one of Earth's most trusted military leaders, had defected to the Ardari. The realization left Morgan feeling colder than the void outside. "They'll come for us," Reyes said softly. "And we'll make them regret it," Morgan replied, her voice low and dangerous. She looked around at the room full of determined faces. "We've been dealt a blow, but we're not finished. We fight harder. We survive." Lex gave a grim nod. "I'll modify the EMP tech. We'll need it if we're going to outmaneuver them." Morgan turned back to the viewport, staring out into the deep expanse of space. They were at a crossroads now, the stakes higher than ever. Admiral Reed's betrayal had changed everything. Earth's leadership was fractured, and trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. But it had also lit a fire under them. The Ardari had underestimated humanity once before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "We fight," Morgan said, the weight of her words settling over the crew like a rallying cry. "We fight with everything we have." The betrayal by Admiral Reed was a gut punch, but it was also a wake-up call. Morgan knew now that there were no lines left to cross in this war. Either humanity stood its ground, or it would be wiped out. The Ardari were methodical, calculating, and ruthless, but they were not infallible. They had made one massive miscalculation. They thought they could break humanity with fear. Reed gave them the coordinates to the Eagle's Claw. "They'll be here in less than 30 minutes. Riaz reported, his voice grim as the crew scrambled to prepare for the imminent attack. Morgan exhaled sharply. She had no illusions that they would make it out of this without taking heavy losses. But they were running out of time, and she knew that this moment would define the course of humanity's future. If they wanted to have any chance of defeating the Ardari, they would need to go deeper into enemy territory, to strike at the heart of their operations. "Prepare the assault teams," Morgan said, turning to her officers. "We're going after Reed's intel. We're going to take down one of their primary research stations. We need to know everything they're planning." Dr. Alexis Carter, who had been working tirelessly on new technologies for the humans to use against the Ardari, raised an eyebrow. "You want to attack their core research facility?" she asked, her voice incredulous. "It's not just a military stronghold, it's a damn fortress." "We don't have a choice," Morgan said. "Reed's intel might have compromised us, but he didn't give them everything. We still have a chance to hit them where it hurts. We go in quiet, disrupt their systems, and take whatever intel we can. The longer we wait, the more they'll tighten their grip." Lex hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right. We'll have to use a mix of stealth tech and manual overrides to breach their security. If we fail, it's over." Morgan gave a sharp nod. "Then we don't fail." The Eagle's Claw and its allied ships entered the Ardari system under the cover of a dense asteroid belt. The research station, known only by its codename Sphinx, was a heavily guarded facility orbiting a dying star, far from the reach of most conventional human operations. Morgan's task force moved quickly, using the debris to mask their movements. As they approached the station, Morgan's tactical team slipped into place, infiltrating through a series of hidden access points. The station was silent, its defenses seemingly unaware of the approaching human threat. But Morgan could feel the tension mounting in her chest. The Ardari were cunning, and the deeper they ventured into the facility, the more dangerous it would become. Deep inside the station, the team discovered a horrifying truth. The Ardari had been conducting biological experiments on human DNA. They had been studying human resilience, adaptability, and, most disturbingly, looking for ways to modify human genetics to better serve as expendable soldiers in their army. The realization hit Morgan like a physical blow. This wasn't just about power, it was about control, and they were willing to sacrifice entire populations to achieve it. "We have to destroy everything," Morgan said, her voice a mix of anger and resolve. "This station cannot stand. We cannot allow them to use us as weapons." As they planted the charges, alarms began blaring through the corridors. The Ardari were on to them. The station's defenses came alive, and soon the facility was engulfed in chaos. A brutal firefight broke out as Morgan's team fought to make their escape. The explosion that ripped through the station was massive. As the Eagle's Claw pulled away from the blast radius, Morgan watched the station's shattered remains slowly drift into the void. They had struck a serious blow to the Ardari, but Morgan knew that the war was only escalating. As the stars stretched out before them, she looked to her crew, tired but resolute. This is just the beginning. We've made our mark. Now, we finish this. But she knew the Ardari would come harder. They would have no mercy now, and the fight would only grow bloodier from here. The destruction of the Sphinx research station had shaken the Ardari to their core. The facility wasn't just a scientific hub. It was a key part of their plans for humanity's genetic manipulation. Morgan knew the blow they had struck would send ripples through the Ardari hierarchy. The problem was that the Ardari had no tolerance for failure, and they would come for Earth with everything they had. "Captain, we're getting reports from the colonies," Lieutenant Reyes said, his voice crackling over the comm. "Resistance groups are making contact. They've seen the footage of what happened at Sphinx. It's spreading. Some of the smaller factions want to join the fight." Morgan's eyes lit up at the news. "Small factions," she repeated. "How small are we talking?" Reyes pulled up a map of the galaxy on the main screen. "Not just small groups, some of the larger colonies have already declared their intent to fight back. Calypso Station, Reeves Moon, and even parts of the Lennius Belt have pledged support. The Ardari kept these systems in check through fear and manipulation. They never thought the resistance would unite like this." Morgan's heart quickened. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the spark that would ignite a full-scale rebellion. If humanity and its allies could coalesce into a unified force, the Ardari would no longer be the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy. "We need to take advantage of this," she said, pacing the room. "We can't afford to wait. If we want to survive, we need to strike while the iron's hot." Lex Carter spoke up, her voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "We've been working on a new type of weapon, something that could cripple the Ardari's fleet, especially their flagship. It's not a kill shot, but it could give us a fighting chance to turn the tide." Morgan turned to her, eyes narrowing. "You have a weapon that can take down their flagship, and you're just telling me now." Lex smiled grimly. "It's an ion disruptor. High frequency, long range. The Ardari's energy shields won't be able to withstand it. It won't destroy the ship outright, but it will disable its systems long enough for us to hit them with everything we've got. I'm ready to deploy it, but we'll need to get close." Reyes' voice cut through. "The Ardari are coming for us, Captain. If we move now, we can intercept them before they reach Earth, but it's going to be dangerous." Morgan paused, her hand resting on the tactical map. The enemy was closing in. The Eagle's Claw was their only shot at stopping the Ardari before they reached Earth, and with the rebellion gaining momentum across the galaxy, now was the time to strike back. "We take the fight to them," Morgan said, her voice steady with resolve. "We unite every colony, every resistance group. If the Ardari want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The news of Earth's strike against the Ardari had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Long-suppressed rebel factions, from the mining colonies of the Lennius Belt to the military holdouts in the Outer Rim, rallied to Morgan's call. They began forming a ragtag but powerful coalition, each group bringing its own unique strength to the growing rebellion. The Ardari, once so secure in their reign, were now facing an enemy they had never truly considered. A unified human front, backed by the determination of those they had long oppressed. The first joint strike, against an Ardari resupply convoy, was a wild success. The Ardari underestimated the power of coordinated human tactics, and the attack crippled their supply lines across the outer sectors. For the first time in decades, the Ardari were on the defensive. Morgan and her crew saw this victory as the beginning of something much larger, a true rebellion that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But they also knew the stakes had just been raised. The Ardari would retaliate, and it would be brutal. "Get ready," Morgan said to her crew, her eyes locked on the star-filled expanse ahead. The Ardari won't just sit back and take this. But neither will we. This is the moment we change everything. The momentum of the human rebellion was building at a rapid pace. The strikes against the Ardari convoy had caused a ripple effect throughout their military structure. Their once untouchable supply lines had been severed, and their communication systems were beginning to fail under the pressure of constant disruption. The Ardari were no longer the impenetrable force they once were. But as the human coalition gained ground, so did the stakes. "We've taken out 3 more resupply ships," Lieutenant Reyes reported, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the battlefront. "The Ardari are reeling, Captain, but their fleet's regrouping. We've triggered their full mobilization, and they're coming for us with everything they've got." Morgan's fingers hovered over the command panel, her mind sharp. The Eagle's Claw had been on the front lines of the fight, but even their ship, with all its advanced stealth tech and powerful weaponry, couldn't take on the full might of the Ardari fleet alone. If the rebellion was going to survive, they would need a base of operations, a place to regroup, refuel, and plan. "We need to establish a stronghold," Morgan said, her voice calm, but filled with purpose. "The Lanius Belt. It's remote, heavily mined, and under Ardari surveillance, but we can fortify it. It'll be our launching point for the next phase." Lex Carter's voice crackled from across the room. "The Lanius Belt is a good choice, if we can hold it. It's not just the Ardari that we're dealing with. The belt's full of hostile factions, mercenaries, and pirates. And the terrain is tricky. We'll need to ensure we can get through without too many casualties." "We can't worry about casualties right now," Morgan replied. "We have to take risks. Our people have to see that we can win this. We strike at the heart of their empire, and we make them bleed. We make them wish they had never underestimated humanity." The Eagle's Claw set course for the Lanius Belt with its newly expanded fleet of resistance ships, a ragtag collection of warships and fighter crafts, each battle-worn but brimming with the spirit of rebellion. The plan was simple. Take the belt, rally every faction willing to join the fight, and turn it into a hub for future operations. As they entered the belt's outer rim, Morgan's thoughts turned to Earth, still vulnerable and isolated from the growing resistance movement. The Ardari had made it clear that they would stop at nothing to crush the rebellion. Their next move would likely be an all-out assault on Earth itself. "How long until we reach the belt?" Morgan asked, her gaze fixed on the viewport. 3 hours, Rhys answered, "and the Ardari are already deploying ships to block our approach." Morgan clenched her jaw. "Then we don't wait for them to come to us. We take the fight to them. We burn through their blockade, and we send a message." As the Eagle's Claw and its fleet neared the Lanius Belt, Morgan's plan took shape. She would have to hit the Ardari hard, disrupt their command center, and then use the chaos to secure the belt. There was no room for hesitation. They couldn't afford to lose momentum now. The rebellion was starting to carve its place in the galaxy, but the next few hours would determine whether they could keep it alive. Morgan's mind buzzed with the weight of her choices, but as the first Ardari ships appeared on the radar, her resolve solidified. "We fight," she said, her voice low but steady, like the calm before a storm. "And we win." The Eagle's Claw and the growing fleet of resistance ships shot through the asteroid fields of the Lanius Belt, each vessel moving with practiced precision. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had less than half the firepower of the Ardari, but Morgan knew this fight wasn't about numbers. It was about striking when the enemy least expected it, and showing the galaxy what humanity was capable of when cornered. Approaching the blockade, Rhys announced, his voice tight with focus. The Ardari ships are in position. We'll need to punch through their front line if we want to get to the belt. Morgan stood at the command center, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The Ardari had formed a tight perimeter, their ships lurking in the debris fields like vultures, waiting for prey. But the humans had something the Ardari didn't, the element of surprise. "We get them hard and fast," Morgan said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "Target their weak spots, their command ships, their shield generators. Disable them, don't destroy. We can't afford a full-scale battle yet." Lex Carter's voice came through from the weapons bay. "Ready the disruptors. We've got one shot at this." "Make it count," Morgan replied. The first wave of human ships dove into the fray, laser fire flashing in all directions as the Eagle's Claw led the charge. They came in low, using the asteroids as cover, before breaking through the perimeter. The Ardari fleet reacted instantly, massive energy shields flaring to life as they brought their weapons to bear. But Morgan's tactics were unconventional. While the Ardari were focused on locking down their perimeter, they hadn't anticipated the guerrilla-style tactics the human rebels employed. As the Eagle's Claw raced toward the heart of the blockade, Lex activated the ion disruptor, sending a pulse of electromagnetic energy through the heart of the Ardari fleet. The flagship's shields flickered and then dropped, leaving it exposed. In that moment, the entire fleet faltered. "Now!" Morgan shouted. The rebel ships surged forward, unleashing a barrage of fire that hit the Ardari fleet where it was weakest, communications and power conduits. The Eagle's Claw unleashed its full payload on the Ardari command ship, ripping through the vessel's systems, sending it spiraling into the depths of space. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the sound of alarms blaring through the Ardari ships filled the void, followed by frantic calls for reinforcements. But the Ardari fleet was already in disarray. The disruption was complete, and their command structure had crumbled. "We've broken their line," Reyes reported, his voice tight with exhilaration. "The Lenius belt is ours." Morgan allowed herself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Ardari would regroup. They would retaliate. And Earth was still vulnerable, isolated in the wake of their shattered diplomacy. But this victory was a turning point. It was the first true defeat the Ardari had suffered in centuries. Morgan stepped onto the bridge, her crew standing tall despite the exhaustion etched into their faces. "This isn't the end," she said, her voice carrying a deep conviction. "We've just proven that we can win, but this is only the beginning. The rebellion has only just begun. We'll fight until the Ardari are no more." Lex Carter, standing beside her, gave a small nod. "They're not invincible. The galaxy is ours to take back." The tension in the room shifted. For the first time, the humans aboard the Eagle's Claw felt a spark of hope. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about victory. As the stars stretched out before them, Morgan knew that the Ardari had underestimated humanity one last time. They had sparked a rebellion that would burn across the galaxy. And this time, it wasn't the Ardari who would determine the future. The humans would. And they would never be subjugated again.